All right. Happy Monday. How's everybody doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Good. Just pushing through. I've been using my Monday morning to try to reduce expenses by calling every vendor in the world. That's been my morning.
Have you been successful?
In some scenarios, I've had a number of crazy things happen, like from a personal health insurance standpoint, due to COVID, I had to actually do blood work at the hospital instead of LabCorp. And they charged me $1,500 for it, for blood work.
That's terrible.
I know. And so I'm like, that was an hour battle this morning that still hasn't been resolved. Because I was forced, they cut back on staff in their doctor's office, and the hospital is billing it as an outpatient service. I tried to call our phone company for the theater, and they're like, nope, we can't give you a reduction. It's just, we can suspend service. And I go,
Oh, no.
I said, so if a customer calls, what message will they hear? That the service is suspended. I'm like, how does that help me?
Right. Crazy.
But all you can do is like keep dialing through and asking.
That's it. And maybe you call back again tomorrow and ask again. Maybe you'll get a different person and a different answer.
Yeah, you just keep calling.
Yeah.
So let's do what I'd like to find out today. We were off last Monday for the holiday. For the people that we have on today, is there anything that's a hot topic or something that you want to talk about that is hot on your mind today? Just kind of want to get that kind of specific out there. Anything plaguing anybody or heavy on your mind?
Gina, I'll go.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a question. I don't know if this is appropriate for this group or not, but I would love to know, we talked a couple of weeks ago, I'd like to add some webinars onto my website.
Yeah.
So if anyone has specific experience doing that, I would love to hear that at some point or connect with them privately.
Okay. So webinar.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have something specific that they're challenged with or is heavy on their mind? Josh?
I don't really have anything on my mind per se, except I think that there's a whole lot of people that would love to say that we're going to get back to normal. And what I'm still trying to figure out is, what does normal look like? Not just right now, but 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Because I think there's a lot of things that have come out of this in many different areas that we just don't have those answers yet. And I'm always trying to get more knowledge and more information on that, because I think knowing those kinds of things will help us with our businesses and our operations on a day-to-day basis now, if we know those things that are even further down the road. So that's what's on my mind.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else?
Have to be aware of the fact that there's going to be a new normal, and it's really up to us to design and orchestrate what that new normal is going to look like for each of our businesses, our families, and everyone else around us as well. So, and I think we should also commend some of the leadership in the Myrtle Beach area for helping to lead some successful, peaceful protests on yesterday, and to help circumvent, the other things that we've seen around our country, prevent those things from happening in our area. So we do need to realize that and recognize them for the efforts that they put into place to sit down and talk with those people, the people who have, really strong feelings about what's going on, and actually listen to them and join in the effort instead of fighting against it. So
Thank you. Anybody else? Carrie, you're good. You're just kind of like here for support this week. I mean, it's all good. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure.
Well, we finally got our PPP loan.
Awesome.
Applied the first day. Just got it. So that's a little bit of a relief.
Great.
Just, I'm waiting for jobs to start picking up. And I'm not seeing it like we were seeing it yet. So that worries me.
Okay. And Elena, anything hot on your mind?
On this end, really, not really. I mean, I'm kind of working on online things. I'm putting together classes and things like that. Just trying to figure out where people are right now in terms of mindset and how to best serve them, really, because it's, you know, my kind of business is very much a one-on-one or an in-person kind of service. With commercial photography and even the other things I do are very much in-person services. So trying to see where they are, especially after the past weekend. A lot of people are a little bit shaken that I've heard. So saying, how can I help with those things from a virtual place. So I'm kind of working. I pretty much put my head down lately, and I've been working on my business rather than you know, working with people. I've really been working on my business and trying to modify a little bit how I do things.
Okay. Okay, great. So that kind of gives me an idea of, I kind of want to work around a couple of things with you guys, if that's okay with everybody. I want to take what Jock, I always get is it T'Mars? Is it T'Mars? T'Mars, I got that right. Okay, I just make sure I got that right. The combination, I want to do a combination right now between Josh and T'Mars. So Josh asked the question, what does the new normal look like? And I think to some extent, T'Mars answered it a little bit. I mean, it answered it in the way I would answer it. I think right now, we don't know. And the sucky thing is that I don't know when we're going to know, right? And that's sort of what's going on here, is no one's really going to give us answers, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and everything is really kind of based on your individual businesses on what you're going to do. And, you know, so sound a little self-serving, but one of the things that's helped me is having those improv skills of having to throw things at the wall and see what's going to work. And I think we're all in a reinvention stage right now, that it's kind of like being it's kind of like being in a startup situation. We're all kind of starting over again because the models we were working in were no longer working in. And I, of all people who is trained in improvising and pivoting quickly, even I am struggling with, and have been struggling with, how do I change how we do things? My biggest piece of advice to everybody is it comes down to experimentation. You know, you're going to have to try something, see if it works. If that doesn't work, then you try something else and see if it works. What's frustrating with that is that we've been operating our businesses a certain way, and now we're being forced into changing that. And so what we're being forced into is discomfort, because we were super comfortable, especially if we were good at what we were doing. We were super comfortable with that working. And it's pretty impossible, I think, to create a business plan or number projections when you have literally no benchmarks. You have no history to go off of. So I think you have to change your mindset to, like, this is a startup and I don't know what I'm going to do. I personally, with my theater business, I've had to really dig deep into my soul and separate emotions from logic. And the reality is, I don't think I can sustain keeping the theater open anymore. So there is a really high chance that I'm going to close it either immediately in the next 2 weeks or end of August. We still don't have clearance to reopen, so I don't know how anybody could think a business could continue to operate. That's why I've been on the phone with vendors. I'm like, I can't pay these bills. There's no money coming in. So that's sort of my thought process on how do you operate with in this new normal. You really have to create a new normal. So you have to think about your customers and where they are. And a lot of that, I've talked about this before, is getting on the phone and calling them and finding out where they are. What are they dealing with? What is a challenge for them right now? What do they wish they could fix? And then trying to help them find that solution. But that means you're going to have to recreate some of your world. So anybody want to kind of jump in and say something about kind of that in general, or maybe you've already started to do some of those things and change how you're doing things. Does anybody want to share?
Well, I'd like to make a question. I could comment on a lot of your stuff, but the one that I find real interesting is, and I don't know this, and that's why I'm asking it, is what has been the response when you talk to landlords for help on your rent on a variety of different ways? I work out of my home, so it's not a huge difference for me, but to me, if I had my own base, I'd be calling the landlord and saying, I want 3 months free rent. Has that been successful? Is that something people have tried? What's going on with that?
I can speak for myself. Our landlord had sent us a letter end of March saying that they wanted rent for April on April 15th at a 50% abatement. And I basically said we couldn't pay anything while we weren't open, and they didn't respond back. And then I messaged them a couple weeks ago and said, we're hoping to open in June. And he said, okay. Said nothing else. Then I sent an email that said, it does not look like we're opening in June. And he didn't respond. That's been my experience. I mean, I got an official letter from them demanding rent, and then I sent an official letter back saying this was the situation. That's been my
had a
That's sad.
similar experience, Gina. I think you know, because we exchanged the letter.
Yeah,
Actually, you sent me a letter, and I've had a similar experience to where I asked, and the landlord's response was, well, we still have our operating costs for the center where your office is, so we want rent like any other month. Nothing has changed for us. I sent that official letter that Gina kindly shared with me, and modified it for my situation and sent it to them, and they said, yeah, it's all, we understand, but we still need the rent. And pretty much I sent a request to cancel my agreement. At this point, I'll take the hit with the penalty because I'm canceling my agreement ahead of time, but it's like I can't pay that rent because I can't go there. Yeah. So that's the deal. And I wanted to make another comment to what Gina said earlier. It's, I kind of feel what you are talking about, because I've been going through the same questioning of whether I should keep kind of bleeding out of my own pocket to keep the business, the commercial photography part of business alive, or kind of trying to do something else. And the only little piece of advice I can give to anybody, if it's any advice really, or other than that kind of sharing what I'm doing, is kind of look at what you've done before, the things you've done, and see if anything is needed. what I found myself doing in the past 3 weeks a lot when I wasn't working on my business heads down was making infection control plans for people that had businesses that are actually allowed to reopen. I was a pathologist for 17 years, so I've done it before when I worked in a hospital. And so I've been doing this for a lot of people, like gyms and places that are getting ready to reopen at lower capacity that are like, well, how do we implement all those rules from the state and from the country right now? And so I've been helping them write their policy and procedures manual for infection control, for prevention and all of that, and put the measures in place down to the practical. Where do you put the tape, to keep your people when they come into the business, and how do you put your signs to regulate touch area like phones or bathrooms or things like that. And it's if you had asked me 5 months ago, I wasn't expecting that I'd be doing that, because I was doing a completely different business. I was going around taking pictures. But sometimes you kind of have to look into your bag of tricks and see, well, is there something that I can use to help people right now where they're at? And maybe it's not my job, it's not my business that I'm doing now, but it's a tool I have and I can use. And maybe, I'm pretty sure all of you have a million things you're doing. So if there's something that doesn't work, Gina's business is called Pivot. I think that's what I'm trying to do. It's like, really, that's
just ironic.
I think that, everybody at this point is in a place where maybe it's worth doing that. And that's my 2 cents.
Thanks. And that's really where I have been focused. I just had to get my mind into a different place. So, 2 weeks ago, I launched an improv class like we would normally run at our theater for 6 weeks, and I launched it online. And we got 15 people signed up into it, which shocked me. I couldn't believe, I'm like, wow, it's like more than we get in a regular class. And the beauty of it is that they're from all over the country. So what that did for me was I'm like, because I'm connected in so many cities, because pre-COVID, I traveled the country. So I have a huge network in Dallas, and I have a huge network in Omaha, and I have a huge network in Chicago. So I have these huge networks where people have met me one-on-one. And now they're like, oh my gosh, we can take a class with you. So it was a new kind of aha of like, I just expanded my market to a way bigger market. And until I forced myself into that zone, I was like, I should have been doing this the whole time. Oh my goodness, this is like, I could be making money constantly now. So sometimes you got to get out of your own way and go, okay, what do I have that I can offer in a different way based on our situation right now?
People I've seen, like music artists, other folks that they do poetry slams via Zoom and other technology means. They're doing virtual concerts. They're actually able to find ways to charge for them. I think Facebook was working on a platform to allow some of those types of events as well. So there's a way for you to remain operational even in the virtual world, without having people physically on site. But I think what a lot of people haven't talked about and probably hadn't thought about was the next level of what this new normal is going to look like. You're going to see an increased level of insensitivity by employers. I'm grateful for where I work and who I work for. Someone that's compassionate about people, and they care for the people that work for them. But I've heard stories of like what you're dealing with, Gina, and you have a facility that you can't use, a space that you can't use because it hasn't been cleared to open yet and still they're expecting you to pay rent, utilities, etc. Well, I guarantee that business has that business that you're leasing from, they've gotten a PPP loan. and they've got money sitting in the bank, but they're begging for the pennies that you're trying to hold on to. You know, there are restaurants were claiming that they couldn't get employees to return to work because the employees were making more money for unemployment than they would be working on site. Well, when you bring those employees back on site, or when they decide to return on site, there are a number of them that are going back to work at a reduced rate. So they're not even making the money that they were making before. So that adds added stress and pressures onto those employees, onto, you know, those kitchen managers in those restaurants. You know, there are just a number of other factors that people really aren't talking about. It's really the insensitivity of these employers and the way they're deciding to reopen. And a number of restaurants that even though there are guidelines set for what you do with your salt shakers, your ketchup bottles, things that are on your tables, cleaning your tables, and wiping down your menus. Some of the restaurants are so busy, the employees will tell you, we're not doing that because we're so busy, we don't have time.
It's
So
true.
those are some things that need to be discussed, because there's just this huge sense of insensitivity that we're going to continue to see. And then it's going to cause just a huge lack a decrease in the quality of service that we're accustomed to getting as well.
I want to comment on that if I can, because I agree with you in part, but I disagree in part too. I think the reality is we don't know. I mean, there's still so many unknowns in terms of employers and employee relationships going on out there right now. Some employers did a great job of keeping their employees on payroll during this whole thing, possibly because of the PPP loans, possibly because they had a little bit of capital to work with. And I think that in that case, many of the people that work for them are going to be incredibly appreciative and loyal to them going forward, because they never did have to go on unemployment and deal with any of that stuff. I also think that there are some businesses out there that continue to do extremely well. You pointed out that some of the restaurants are so busy, they just can't even keep up with the regulations. And some of them stayed that busy with curbside and delivery and different kinds of things, particularly in the restaurant business, while this was going on. Meanwhile, on the other side, other businesses are closing or barely staying open. So you've got a real dichotomy going on here of differences between different kinds of businesses. And I think each business has to carve that out for themselves. Yes, some businesses had employees that made a lot more money on unemployment, but they also had to come back to work when they were told to, or they lost all their unemployment. So they didn't have a whole lot of choice in the matter. And some of them are very happy to go back because now they've got a job after getting all that extra money. So they did okay during this situation. So every situation is different.
Yeah.
There isn't one consistency
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing.
No, and I think getting back to what T'Mars is saying about insensitivity, I think in general, and I want to segue this into, what's been going on in the past week, in general, as humans, we have to find a way to become more sensitive and open and emotionally intelligent, and recognize that every business is going through a different thing, and every person is going through a different thing, and it affects everybody differently. I guess it looks like that meme I saw about, like, we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats, right? So depending on how your boat handles the storm, right, is going to be different. And I think that's where the sensitivity's got to come in, and especially with whether you're dealing with employees or you're dealing with customers, you're going to have that sensitivity hat on, and approach everything that way with that kind of a heart. And with that being said, T'Mars, I want to open it up to you, T'Mars, because I know this is really fresh. And if it's okay with you, any kind of perspective you want to share or shed light on or emote on, this is something that's been heavy on my heart all week, because there's there's just, it's just, I can't even put words to it, but to complicate the matters at hand is, I just feel like there's so much struggle between people and their points of view, and there's different levels of ignorance, and there's different levels of people going, no, just educate me, I want to know. And there's so many people attacking each other in social media over what's going on. And so you alluded to it, so I want to open the floor to you, that if you want to have the floor to say anything that you're thinking or feeling or could shed light on us, that are frankly white and don't necessarily understand how you feel, what you're going through, what your perspective is. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's important to open dialogue.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm not a very vocal person, but I do have very strong feelings, not just because of my origin or the color of my skin, but because I'm human and I care about life, and I just don't think that any human should take anyone else's life upon themselves and think that they've got the power to control when someone lives and when someone dies. So I have 2 sons, 14 and 16. And I just, just over the past week, sitting talking to my wife, I was reminded of when my sons were babies. They were in car seats, and we had gone to Charlotte to visit some friends and family. We were leaving that Sunday morning, and I stopped by a Circle K gas station to get gas. And at the time, I think I was banking with Bank of America, and there were a number of the gas station machines when they were starting to make changes with the credit cards. So they wouldn't charge you the exact amount. Sometimes that's when they started putting the holes on your accounts. Well, I got gas, but then when I looked at my bank account, because I had to run my card twice, it looked like it had like $100 charge and a hold on my account, and then it had like a $20-something charge or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. Either way, I went into the store to question the clerk about it, and she called the cops on me. And so, and this is back in 2000, probably 2007, 2008. And so she called the cops. I had no idea she called the cops because I just went back out to my car. Next thing you know, cop car pulls up behind us. And so I'm like, why did she call the cops? And come to find out, she told the cops that they had instances where people had been stealing gas from that station, and management had informed them if anyone stole gas during their shift, they would be fired. So she had fear of losing her job. And so I literally explained to the cop, like, look, how am I trying to steal gas and I'm still sitting here? And number 2, I've got my wife sitting next to me and 2 car seats in the back of my car. You know, to me, it just doesn't logically make sense for me to try to steal gas in that particular situation. So I put them on the phone with my bank, and they explained, you know, the charges that they were seeing on my account, and, you know, they let it go. And after numerous calls, you know, weeks later with Circle K, they tried to make me feel bad for the situation, saying that the employee was placed on leave. I'm like, wait a minute, what about me? Like, like, you inconvenienced and embarrassed me. You know, not that I was put in handcuffs or anything, but you know, that could happen to anybody. But it was unfortunate, and it could have been a worse situation, but it wasn't. But it happened. But just looking at what's been happening this week, and with a recently licensed 16-year-old in my house, just looking at even in my own neighborhood, our Facebook group, comments that my own neighbors make about people just walking around the neighborhood, and we've had some kids rummaging through cars, things of that nature, and video surveillance clearly shows that most of the kids that they've seen are Caucasian. We only have a handful of African Americans that even live in the community, but it makes us think twice before we even go outside and walk around our neighborhood. And both of my boys are track athletes. They don't even run in the neighborhood anymore because you know, there have been comments that If you see somebody suspicious, just shoot them. You can't take people's lives into your own hands. But you know, we just been you know, really careful. I'm very careful what I say. I posted about it on social media once, and literally what I said was that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the easiest explanation for what or the reason why most people are so angry is if you look at how Dylan Roof was apprehended, knowing that he had killed 9 parishioners in Charleston, captured in North Carolina peacefully, and taken to Burger King to get food. And then you have George Floyd, who choked to death. Unsuspected that he may have committed forgery. You know, Ahmaud Arbery, who was shot because there's a former police officer, his family and friends that decided to take matters into their own hands, and he hadn't done anything. Those are the reasons why it's like, why can't, if you suspect an African American or some other nationality, if you suspect them of doing something, instead of taking matters into your own hands, let law enforcement deal with it. Or if there's really not, you don't have enough evidence to even make a claim, leave it alone. Because there's so many cases where things could have been left alone and these people could have still been alive today. But now you got people losing husbands and wives, and they're losing children. And now we're seeing the looting and the rioting, which is not always started by those that are angry about what's going on. There are embedded people placed into those crowds to start the rioting, to start the looting. And so there's just too many things going on. It's just wild and all over the place. But I'm grateful for my circle of friends that don't look like me, that understand. And I'm grateful for everybody else that has compassion for, you know, our police force. Every policeman that you encounter is not bad. Everyone is not bad. But I'm grateful for even my sons that understand this is going on, but I know how to channel my own anger. And I'm going to continue to have these conversations with my parents, and I'm going to make sure that I'm putting myself in a place where I can protect myself, and if I'm out, I can live to make it back home safe and sound.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot like that. But I think that the only way for stuff to start getting better is open conversations and dialogue. And so that's why I wanted to get that started. Is there any advice or suggestions you can give to people who don't look like you, that can't really be in your shoes to fully empathize? How can we help support change? And it's a big question.
Yeah, just look at it as if that's your family member. If you love your family member, no matter if that's your husband, your wife, your cousin, your child, your niece, your nephew, aunt, uncle, neighbor, it doesn't matter. Imagine if that were to directly happen to a member of your family. How would that impact you for the rest of your life? And then how would you react? There's so many people that has so many really positive things to say about the Charleston community and how they reacted to the death of the Charleston 9, where they immediately forgave. Well, guess what? Everybody is not going to immediately forgive. Some people are going to want revenge. I've always been taught, and I've always been raised in the fear of God, that you know, revenge comes from God. I mean, no matter what you do, you're not supposed to take that into your own hands. You're supposed to allow God to take care of those things. So I just, like I said, imagine if that were you. If you had just been stopped on a routine traffic stop, and you were, you know, tased or pulled out of your car for no reason, or there have been drugs that were planted in your car just to set you up. or if you were just targeted, period, just because of the color of your skin. Just imagine how that would impact you and your family. And that's really about, in my opinion, the easiest way that I can say that anybody can put yourself in those shoes. I'm not out there protesting. They probably said, some people probably think every Black person should be out there protesting. I'm not out there protesting. There are things that you can do without having to physically hit the streets. But again, I mean, really, we have to commend even, I know I mentioned City of Myrtle Beach, but Conway led some very peaceful protests as well over the weekend. And so just really just think about how, if it were to happen to you or one of someone that you love, how would that impact you?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm in a constant place of seeking education and enlightenment because I think many of us are shook up and frankly don't know what to do or don't know what to say. And sometimes you say the wrong thing. And I chalk it up to sometimes we're just ignorant because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know unless we seek it. And I had said that online to someone without even frankly noticing that she was African American. You know, her picture was small. I wasn't really looking at her face, and there was commentary going back and forth. And I'd said something like, you know, I think ignorant people need education. And so if you're ignorant, I mean, an ignorant is lacking knowledge. So if you're ignorant, you need education. And sometimes you need people to actually lead you to the information because sometimes you're so ignorant, you don't know you're ignorant. So how do we lead people to education? And then she just went after me and she's like, oh, you're putting it on Black people again to educate people. And I was like, I'm like, I didn't, I never said that. And B, I didn't even notice you were Black, sorry. And I'm just looking at it as a pure leadership thing. Like we all have the opportunity to be leaders and to step out of our zone to be better leaders. But first, someone needs to lead us to the knowledge to be leaders. That's my bandwagon.
Words are so important nowadays because they can be, well, they've always been easily misconstrued and misinterpreted. Just think, you received an email from somebody and you might read it one way and everyone else that gets it can interpret it another way. And it could have, one solid meaning, but it's just according to, that person's state of mind when they read it, or maybe things that have happened in the past. So and I think if you have social media accounts, you've probably seen, even in this area where people have made some very, very reckless and very, very direct and racist comments on their own posts and other people's posts. And then they try to hide behind that. Well, people have been hiding behind social media for the longest. Because I try to explain it like this. I'm like, when people have a problem, instead of them going to talk it out with a therapist, they put it on social media, and that's their way of getting it out. And so people just think that there's not a trail that where somebody's going to find you. Well, guess what? You got folks now that not only will screenshot your messages and your posts and your responses, but they will find you, they will find your family, they will find most likely your employer. And that's really who they go after first. They don't go after your families. They go to your employers and they say, does this person in their comments represent the values of your company? I was just reading right before this Zoom call that there's a city clerk in the city of Darlington that was just relieved of her duties today for some racist comments that she made on social media.
Wow.
And there are a number of people in the Gracie Floyd's area, the North Myrtle Beach area, who have all been making some very, very racist comments. And if you know, I think there was a lady who was she was an employee at Lexington Medical Center outside of Columbia. She lost her job. You think about the lady in Central Park that wouldn't put her dog on a leash, and when the gentleman asked her to put her dog on a leash, which was in a restricted area, and there were signs everywhere that says your dogs have to be on a leash, she ended up, losing her job and she lost her dog as well because she was mistreating the dog on camera. She literally was choking the dog with the way that she was handling it. So so now she wants to issue an apology, but again, it's you can't allow your feelings to ruin people's lives, because that literally is what typically happens. You accuse somebody just because of the color of their skin of being a threat to you because you feel threatened. You know, that's just not, it's not right. It's not right. Like I said, it's too many times I've even walking in a mall or just anywhere, and you walk by someone of the opposite color and they clutch their purse. And I'm like, I don't want your purse.
It's not your color.
No, I don't want it. I don't have my own purse, so no.
It doesn't
No,
I
I don't want your purse. And I mean, those are just things. I mean, even, you know, I mean, I'm just reminded of an incident when my wife and kids were walking in the neighborhood, you know, a couple of years ago, and this gentleman had I forgot what kind of car it was. It was maybe a Camaro or something, and they were walking. He was like, "Don't touch my car. Do you realize what kind of car this is?" And my wife was like, "It's only a Camaro. Anybody can get one of those." Like, what do you mean? You know, but it's just some people. You can't change people. You can't even something as recent as Carolina Forest High School had graduation last week. There was a graduate that stood in front of a water fountain, pointing both hands at the water fountain, stating, "This is white privilege." Posted it on Snapchat, and so the school district really couldn't do anything about it because she just graduated. So she was no longer a student there. But you got to think a lot of the history that, as far as Black history, a lot of it is not taught in schools. So where are these people learning this type of information, these behaviors? At home.
Oh, yeah.
If I could just make one comment, because most of what we've been talking about here is just racism as a whole. And that is something that we always have to keep working on a lot, a little, wherever we can, however we can. But the big issue to me is the racism that exists within police departments, because this is what continues to cause many of the problems that exist. And in my opinion, there's not nearly enough being done with the police departments in every single community in the United States to address this issue. There needs to be not just sensitivity training or, you know, those kinds of things. You need to have strong measures taken, aggressive measures to diversify the police force, ongoing efforts so that they're educated accordingly, consequences that occur that go far beyond your individual performance, that affect the entire police department so that everybody buys in. There's a whole lot more that needs to be done at that level. And, you know, that's not going to cure other kinds of racism, but if you start it there, or not start it there, but if you make sure your efforts are focused there, that will help some of the other racism, and it'll help make it easier to be able to combat it in everyday life. My thoughts.
I completely agree with that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what you saw in Minneapolis was, you know, 4 cops in that scenario with George Floyd. Some of these cops knew him personally, and later on found out that they had all been bouncers at some club or venue in that area for a number of years. I mean, about a decade or so. He even called one of them by name. And just the fact that, you know, it went from he had been handcuffed, he had been sat on the sidewalk, and then after being placed in the back of the cop car, you notice that there was some type of struggle going on. So then he pulled out of the car again, then placed on the ground with a knee on the back of his neck, and then you had 2 others with knees on his back and the lower parts of his body. So seeing that none of these cops were placed on administrative leave. It took, grassroots efforts to get to even get to the point where there would be an arrest. And even before the arrest, taxpayer dollars were wasted with having National Guard outside of this cop's home protecting him. And that adds to the frustration. Again, as Josh stated, there has to be some repercussions for these officers that take these types of matters into their own hands. They step outside of the boundaries of their training. There have been other policemen that have spoke out and said that is not a part of their training, and placing your knee in the back of someone's neck.
I was just gonna ask. I can't imagine that that's part of the training for apprehending someone.
It's not. And the first person I heard it from was from an actual physician. It's not a part of police training. I'm like, what would he know about police training? But then whenever other cops started, voicing their opinions about it, I was like, wow, it actually isn't. And they said once you've got that person handcuffed and they're on the ground, they're already at a very vulnerable state. Like they really can't do anything to hurt or harm you. Right. So, and then, you've got other, just when people start to look at all these other arrests and how they're handled. Again, you got in the state of Michigan a couple of weeks ago when they were protesting because salons weren't open, barbershops weren't open, and there were Caucasian folks in the state house with assault rifles standing against the walls, and there was no police interaction at all. But then you have African Americans that decide to peacefully protest, and all of a sudden they're getting hit with rubber bullets and tear gas. There was a I don't know if you saw what was going on in Atlanta this weekend, but there was 2 young college students that Atlanta's curfew was 6 p.m. and they had just gotten off of work or something, and they were on their way home. 6:14 p.m. driving down the streets of Atlanta, cops stopped their car, pulled the young lady out of the car, and tased the young man from both sides sitting in the seat. Arrested. They were both fired from their jobs. But guess what? Fired isn't good enough. Being arrested isn't good enough. We need convictions. We need prison time, and because you have to have some stronger measures in place. And unfortunately, you got to make an example out of a few of them in order to get the rest of them to understand that it's not going to be tolerated. You can't take these people's lives into your own hands. You just can't.
And meanwhile, I don't know if you listened to the Atlanta mayor. She was like a mama. She was like, go home.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She was like a mama. I mean, that was like a mama speech if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of a lot of these cities need. They need people that care. They need leaders that actually care. And we've seen a lot of these leaders out in the streets with the protesters. There was a U.S. representative in one of the cities that was shot with rubber bullets, this weekend, standing with the protesters. So, but then you see the images from New York where their cops are just ruthless. They could just be walking next to you, and you see them just pushing people like feet away just from sheer anger. You see them just running people over with their police cars and on their horses. It's just bananas. And I mean, I would love to be out there, to be able to go out there and peacefully protest, but you never know what it can turn out to. And I don't want to take my wife, my sons out there, and then we get separated, something happens, so there are just too many dangers too many factors that are out of our control. We need peace. We need peace, and we need some type of structure and a greater sensitivity from the current leadership in our country. Instead of saying when they start looting, we stop shooting, give somebody a sense of peace, letting them know that we understand your concerns and that, we understand that there's some things that need to be done to address them. And that we'll work to try to come to some type of understanding versus encouraging the violence.
I gotta go, guys. I got a 1 o'clock thing I gotta get to.
Okay, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mars. Very much appreciated.
Okay, Josh.
I appreciate you.
We'll see you next
later.
week, Josh. Yeah, I appreciate that, T'Mars, and I think it's important, while we're not totally talking about business on this, I think it's important because it leaks into business. And I think that's a whole nother aspect for a combination of reasons. We are already suffering as a country from the pandemic, where my heart, you know, because I'm so entrenched in business and trying to help other businesses, like just seeing other businesses be destroyed through riots hurts me, because it's like mom and pop shops just getting back up and then becoming victims of this. And we know that those people rioting are rioting to riot for opportunity, right? They're looting for opportunity. They're not doing it to try to make things better. I think there's a certain percentage of that, but it's like, why hurting these businesses is just what kills me. And so I think as business leaders, we have to continue to search for answers and understanding so that we can help support. I have a really good friend in Florida who's been on my podcast before, and her name is Najee, and she is this beautifully vivacious, just inside and out beautiful Black woman. And yesterday she posted this, she struggled with posting it, and then she posted it, and she got bashed. She got major backlash for it, but it was her opinion. She was coming from her opinion being, I'm a Black woman, I'm not oppressed, I've never felt oppressed, I've never felt discriminated against. Like, it was her opinion on what she has experienced in her walk in life. And she's highly successful, and she does extremely well, and is a serial entrepreneur. I didn't even realize, you know, she talked about it in her video. At 18, she got her first SBA loan. I was like, how'd you do that? I want to know how to do that. And she got a lot of backlash for putting it out there. You know, she got a lot of backlash from people who look like her, right? And so, you know, because that's not their experience. And she's like, I'm just sharing my experience. And so one of the things she said, she's like, if you want to be part of the solution, help a Black business, you know, help support that Black business. If you want to be part of the solution, help a kid go to college who doesn't have the money, that, you know, because of the color of his skin, how, you know. And so she had a really a lot of great suggestions for how we could be better at helping each other. And I think in business, even more so, that's important. You know, I used to sit on the Chamber's Diversity Council when we first started that council, which T'Mars you might want to check into if you're not familiar with it. And, you know, we were trying to actually, for the first year, try to like have, we made it an award category at the Chamber's annual business awards, business meeting. And we struggled finding minority businesses to participate. And so it was up to the committee to go out into the community and find other businesses. They didn't have to be chamber members. How can we help support them? And like, the committee really didn't have a whole lot of success doing it. So, you know, how can we provide solutions?
I think I think kind of a lot of people as a whole began to appreciate small business whenever we went into quarantine, because some of the small businesses were the only businesses that were open, even though there was big business open like Walmart, grocery stores, things of that nature. But for some specialty needs, the small businesses were the only places you can get those from. I actually personally take time to support smaller businesses, and even, share their information on my personal social media accounts so that people are made aware of them, because a lot of them they did struggle during the quarantine as well. And my heart has been completely broken for those businesses that have been looted and rioted, especially those small business owners. Because they're putting their own personal funding into leasing spaces and buying products and materials that they want to sell. And I mean, they're high-end boutiques in the Atlanta area that were looted and robbed, and they were owned by minorities.
Yeah.
Some of them were startups, things of that nature. It's heartbreaking. It's like, you gotta really pay attention to, what's happening in those types of scenarios, because it's gonna be hard for them to bounce back than a Target that's burned down or a Walmart that's burned down.
Exactly. I don't know. Maybe something can come of it. Maybe there's something we can collectively come up with, because now those disadvantaged businesses, they're categorized as disadvantaged, especially if you get certified. Now they're at even a bigger disadvantage.
Yeah.
They're
You got to physically rebuild. They may not have the resources for that.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the number of those small businesses that were struggling with, getting PPP loans. Like, I don't know Carrie's situation, but in my opinion, there's no way it should have taken her that long to get a PPP loan. There's just no way in the world when you've got a Ruth Chris who received, almost $40 million in PPP funding and ended up returning half of it. I'm like, they're not even open.
No, they're open time.
They couldn't even meet the guidelines for the loan, because you needed, and the guidelines are changing again. I don't know if it's passed yet, but Carrie, I think I shared some of it in the Facebook group, that all those rules are changing again. But you're talking about a company that got money for funds, and they couldn't even bring their employees back in time to actually meet the requirements of payroll.
Nope, and we stayed open the entire time and didn't let anybody go. And it took us, the first second that we could apply, we applied on the first wave.
Yeah.
And it took forever. I mean, there was a point where I thought, I'm just going to have to close. I'm going to lose all my money, because I opened 2 years ago, got hit with 2 hurricanes, and now all this. And I'm like, we're not going to make it. But thankfully it came in. And
good.
Now the sensitivity thing, our corporate wants us to go door to door with all the information about the COVID stuff. And I'm like, it's too soon. A lot of businesses aren't open. Some you still have to wait in line.
Yeah, I think you need to follow your gut on that, Carrie, and use emotional intelligence. And it's knowing who your customers are and knowing when you can go to them and how to approach them. I'm going to continue to say that the approach right now has to come from a place of sensitivity and more of a place of reach out and be like, hey, what's going on with you? I just kind of want to check in with you, and not be in a selling approach right now.
Yeah. And now, with everything else,
I think that's the other.
So the last thing people want to deal with.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I kind of wanted to open the floor with T'Mars, and you did open the door for me to go there with you, so thank you. I think it's important because people's emotions are at a high level of raw right now for a combination of what's going on, not just the pandemic, but now all of this. With police brutality and what's happened in the rioting, and like people are just raw. And so I think we just right now have to come from a place of kindness and love. And I started saying that on social media, and of course I got slapped down again. Because now my attitude is like, because of what Najee said, Niaje had said, that I shared her video, and anybody connected with me on Facebook can find it. She's definitely a little more woo. I call her a little woo woo. But she talks about high vibrations and low vibrations, which I do believe in, of, you know, high vibrations of love and like low vibrations being fear and anger and guilt, and how all that does is, you know, if you're into law of attraction, that just brings you down to an even lower level. And even if you're not into that, you know, just common sense, if you're around people who are negative all the time, it is going to affect you. You are going to become negative. Just association.
Yep.
So if we can try to raise that vibration to something a little more positive, not that you don't have to necessarily get woo woo, but every time I see someone like there's someone I know who keeps posting the death numbers every day. I just had to stop following her, the death numbers on COVID. I'm like, this is not helping me, my soul right now, seeing how many people have died every day. She says she wants to do it as a way to reflect back on, you know, when it comes up in her memories next year. I don't know why I wouldn't want to reflect on how many people died. So I've had to turn that off her feed, because it's not a positive look forward to something. I had another friend who said to me in a kind of matter-of-fact way, he's like, I just feel like I have nothing to look forward to. And, you know, think about the anxiety that people are experiencing. He didn't say it in a suicidal way. It was just like literally, I got nothing to look forward to. Can't plan a vacation, can't do a this, can't do a that. And we work out together. I go, you have working out with me to look every day. And
It's entertaining all by itself.
I'm like, you know, you just have to find it. You have to find the positive in what we're going through right now. You just have to, because if you don't, you'll implode. I know we're a little bit over time. If we got a couple minutes, I just kind of wanted to jump over to Brenda. I wanted to get more information, Brenda, on what specifically you want from a webinar perspective. Can you give us more details when you say you want to put webinars on your website?
Yeah, so so right now I don't have any. So I've got some free informational webinars that I could post, but which would not be a problem for me. I mean, that I can do. But I guess I'm thinking at some point down the road, not immediately, but down the road, to have passive income stream coming in, webinars that people might want to buy or pay for.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know there's a whole thing around that, and I honestly haven't even started the research. I just thought I'd throw the question out if anyone currently did it. Clearly, there would be a great resource for me and someone to talk to. And
are you specifically looking for, how do you put it on your website, or?
I think at this point, just general information in terms of how people do it, the pricing. Are there different levels, maybe level 1, and maybe there's a level 2 or a stage 2 where you get deeper into information versus a level 3. So just basic guidelines. And I'm just starting the process. And do you have an end goal in mind for this? So the purpose of the webinars is what? So one would be another way to educate people about being more organized so they could be more productive, save time, save money, and then secondly, a passive income stream. Okay. Yeah. And do you have, I mean, I know what you do, but just to give us all an overview, you have other ways in the past that people can work with you from an organization standpoint. Right. Are you helping people organize their homes and their offices virtually? So the home organizing is a challenge for me personally, because I'm such a hands-on person, and plus a lot of my clientele are seniors, And so a lot of the things need to be moved or lifted, and it's if they don't have someone with them to help them, and it's very frustrating, not only for them but for me, because I can't help them. I can't jump through the screen.
Yeah.
I am more comfortable, more successful with helping people organize their paperwork virtually, and so I've started doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very doable for people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from the senior perspective, you could think about, and I'm just trying to think of other products for you.
Yep.
So typically, like, webinars can be used for a couple different things. They can be used as an entry level into other things you do.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you can do free webinars to get people into your funnel, so to speak, so that they may then want to purchase something else from you that's at a higher ticket item.
Okay. Yep.
Or you can, like, the one thing that Carla's helping me with right now is the virtual conference we had, and we recorded all of those sessions, and so that will get repackaged as a product that people can buy that's a training product.
Yep.
So you can have it as a way just for as a marketing piece, or as a way to make money. If I were you, I would just start doing it.
Yeah.
Just start doing it.
Yeah. And by the way, I did have a great conversation with Carla, 2 or 3 weeks ago, whatever, after the last meeting that I joined. And
Awesome.
so she gave me some great advice. Honestly, the past couple of weeks I've been devoted to a different project, so I haven't had time to really get back to this, but now I'm starting to think about it again. But great advice. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, I would just start doing it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing with webinars. It's hard to get people on live because they're busy.
Yep.
You know, you see, like, we average on this every Monday about anywhere from 6 to 10 people float in and out, but I stay consistent with having them because people are going to jump in when they need to be here, right?
Yep.
So you can't count on people coming on live to everything. Right. So just getting something recorded.
Yep.
And even if that means, like, inviting this group and saying, hey, I'm going to do this webinar, could you come and participate? Just so you can get it recorded.
Yep.
And then you can put that on your website. Either, you know, it could be used as I'm sure Carla's giving you way more brilliant ideas. It's so much easier for me to give advice to others than myself.
For all of us.
That's why I have Carla. But you could use a webinar as a way to get people onto your mailing list. Mm-hmm. Like, here's this free webinar. Just put in your email address and start building your list that way. But you also need to think about, actually, Carla and I talked about this morning. This is not any new information, but if you're not familiar with what's something called an ascension model.
What is it?
It's called an ascension model. So it's basically creating a series of products that you kind of put people through to get them to a higher level.
Oh, and I'm sorry, could you spell it, Gina? Spell that word?
ASCENSION, something like that.
Ascension. No, I got it. Thank you. Yep.
Show up.
Got it.
So it's having the, you know, get them here and then get them here and then get them here and then right to their or, you know, somebody might just go straight to your top thing that you're selling. So anybody, and that's what I'm working on today, anybody can think about what it is that they sell, and you have a number of things that you sell or a number of products that you offer. Mm-hmm. And to me, the easiest customer to get is a repeat customer. So once they're in your world already buying from you, you can get them to buy more. Carla and I were talking about that this morning. People take our improv level 1 class over and over and over again. And people are like, why would they do that? Well, because they enjoy it, and improv is a practice. So if you want your brain to work faster, or you want to become a better listener, these are things you have to practice. So people, or they like the fact that they get to meet new people every time they take a class. So repeat customers way easier to get than having to go out and find new business, because there's a cost to that acquisition of a new customer.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps.
Very helpful. Thank you, Gina. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions or need anything?
I just want to say thank you to T'Mars for explaining a little bit about his point of view and how, you know, and his experience. Because for a lot of us, we really have a hard time getting in your shoes. Right. Even when we try. I mean, I have friends that are African American, and I try to think, you know, what would they feel in a certain situation, or what would their experience be. But for me, I mean, I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm as white as I can be, and I probably look like, I was laughing when he was talking about the white protester with the rifles, because it's like, I didn't go protest, but those people look like me. I look like them. Those are the people I grew up with. You know, I'm a firearms instructor. I'm one of them in a way. I didn't go protest, but I look like all of them. And it's hard sometimes when we try to get in your shoes, to think how would our experiences be if we look like you. And I'm pretty sure, you know, that my experiences would be a lot different if I look like you. I spent a lot of my day on a gun range, and so probably if I was a person of color, I would get stopped every day, and I don't. And I really want to thank you for, you know, opening your heart in a way and really telling us what things look like, and what you have to be careful about with your children and with your family, and about yourself, to make sure you get home every night. And I really appreciate that, you know, you were really forthcoming to say this on a group call, because I know it's probably not easy. So thank you.
Yeah.
Never would have said it unless Gina had asked. So.
Well, you can't.
Thank you, Gina, for asking that too. For putting you on the spot. But really, you know, it's like, for a lot of us, it's hard. It's like, we're so different. Our experience in our life is so different. You know, I'm like,
well, I think that
little white girl that goes around with a 45 every day, and if I was of color, probably I'd be in jail for doing nothing.
Well, I think this is a big part of that contributes to the problem and the consistency of the problem, is that there is discomfort in having the conversation, right? Like, I did have a moment of like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him to talk about it. And he will either say yes or no. And if he says no, it's okay. I don't think he will, because he opened the door just a little. So I'm like, I'm gonna bring it up, because I want us to continue to have that dialogue. And I think, you know, what I've never heard before is you saying, just think about that as a loved one in your own family. And so that is a really good way to niche it down. If you have a hard time putting yourself in those shoes, thinking about it that way gives it a whole new perspective. And one quick story, I had once been schooled on Black Lives Matter, and I'm coming from truly a positive place of like, I mean, like, I'm like, why can't all lives matter? And I got schooled on it, and I was so happy I'm being schooled about it, because I didn't understand it, of why all Black Lives Matter as its own hashtag, why it's so important, and how any other hashtag with Lives Matter in it, how offensive that can be and how insensitive that can appear. But again, like I said earlier, sometimes we don't know that we're ignorant. And so I'm grateful every time someone can either pull me aside to educate me, because I don't know what I don't know, or we have to have the bravery and the courage to ask someone like T'Mars to speak up. So once again, thank you for that. Awesome, guys. I appreciate this. And if you guys have nothing else, I'll see you next Monday. Whoever is here is here. If you need anything, reach out to me.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Have a
Thank you,
good day,
Gina.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, have a great
Thanks.
week, everyone.
Have a great week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.